Coquelin and Molière, some aspects. To see Coquelin in Molière is to see the greatest of comic actors at his best, and to realize that here is not a temperament, or a student, or anything apart from the art of the actor. His art may be compared with that of Sarah Bernhardt for its infinite care in the training of nature. They have an equal perfection, but it may be said that Coquelin, with his ripe, mellow art, his passion of humor, his touching vehemence, makes himself seem less a divine machine, more a delightfully faulty person. His voice is firm, sonorous, flexible, a human, expressive, amusing voice, not the elaborate musical instrument of Sarah, which seems to go by itself, clean, cooing, lamenting, raging, or in that wonderful swift chatter which she uses with such instant and deliberate effect. And, unlike her, his face is the face of his part, always a disguise, never a revelation. I have been seeing the three Coquelins and their company at the Garrick Theatre. They did Tartuffe, L'Avare, Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, Les Précieux Ridicules, and a condensed version of Le Dépit Amoureux, in which the 4 acts of the original were cut down into 2. Of these 5 plays only 2 are in verse, Tartuffe and Le Dépit Amoureux, and I could not help wishing that the fashion of Molière's day had allowed him to write all his plays in prose. Molière was not a poet, and he knew that he was not a poet. When he ventured to write the most Shakespearean of his comedies, L'Avare, in prose, Le Même Préjugé, Voltaire tells us, qui avait fait tomber le festin de Pierre, parce qu'il était en prose, nuit au succès de l'Avare. Cependant le public qui, à la longue, se rend toujours au bon, finit par donner cet ouvrage les applaudissements qu'il mérite. On comprit alors qu'il peut y avoir de fort bonnes comédies en prose. How infinitely finer, as prose, is the prose of L'Avare than the verse of Tartuffe's verse. In Tartuffe all the art of the actor is required to carry you over the artificial jangle of the Alexandrines without allowing you to perceive too clearly that this man, who is certainly not speaking poetry, is speaking in rhyme. Molière was a great prose writer, but I do not remember a line of poetry in the whole of his work in verse. The temper of his mind was the temper of mind of the prose writer. His worldly wisdom, his active philosophy, the very mainspring of his plots, are found, characteristically, in his valets and his servant maids. He satirizes the miser, the hypocrite, the bas bleu, but he chuckles over Francine and Gros René. He loves them for their freedom of speech and their elastic minds, ready in words or deeds. They are his chorus, if the chorus might be imagined as directing the action. But Molière has a weakness, too, for the bourgeois, and he has made M. Jourdan immortally delightful. There is not a really cruel touch in the whole character. We laugh at him so freely because Molière lets us laugh with such kindliness. M. Jourdan has a robust joy in life. He carries off his absurdities by the simple good faith which he puts into them. When I speak of M. Jourdan, I hardly know whether I am speaking of the character of Molière or of the character of Coquelin. Probably there is no difference. We get Molière's vast, succulent farce of the intellect rendered with an art like his own. If this, in every detail, is not what Molière meant, then so much the worse for Molière. Molière is kind to his bourgeois, envelops him softly in satire as in cotton wool, dandles him like a great baby, and Coquelin is without bitterness, stoops to make stupidity heroic, a distinguished stupidity. A study in comedy so profound, so convincing, so full of human nature and of the art-concealing art of the stage, has not been seen in our time. As Mascarille, in Les Précieux Ridicules, Coquelin becomes delicate and extravagant, a scented whirlwind, his parodies more splendid than the thing itself which he parodies, more full of fine show and nimble bravery. There is beauty in this broadly comic acting, the beauty of subtle detail. Words can do little to define a performance which is a constant series of little movements of the face, little intonations of the voice, a way of lolling in the chair, a way of speaking, of singing, of preserving the gravity of burlesque. In Tartuffe we get a form of comedy which is almost tragic, the horribly serious comedy of the hypocrite. Coquelin, who remakes his face, as by a prolonged effort of the muscles, for every part, makes, for this part, a great fish's face, heavy, suppressed, with lowered eyelids and a secret mouth, out of which steals at times some stealthy avowal. He has the movements of a great slug, or of a snail, if you will, putting out its head and drawing it back into its shell. The face waits and plots, with a sleepy immobility, covering a hard, indomitable will. It is like a drawing of Daumier, if you can imagine a drawing which renews itself at every instant, in a series of poses to which it is hardly necessary to add words. I am told that Coquelin, in the creation of a part, makes his way slowly, surely, inwards, for the first few weeks of his performance, and that then the thing is finished, to the least intonation or gesture, and can be laid down and taken up at will, without a shade of difference in the interpretation. The part of Maître Jacques in L'Avare, for instance, which I have just seen him perform with such gusto and such certainty, had not been acted by him for 20 years, and it was done, without rehearsal, in the midst of a company that required prompting at every moment. I suppose this method of moulding a part, as if in wet clay, and then allowing it to take hard, final form, is the method natural to the comedian, his right method. I can hardly think that the tragic actor should ever allow himself to become so much at home with his material, that he dare ever allow his clay to become quite hard. He has to deal with the continually shifting stuff of the soul and of the passions, with nature at its least, generalized moments. The comic actor deals with nature for the most part generalized, with things palpably absurd, with characteristics that strike the intelligence, not with emotions that touch the heart or the senses. He comes to more definite and to more definable results, on which he may rest, confident that what has made an audience laugh once will make it laugh always, laughter being a physiological thing, wholly independent of mood. In thinking of some excellent comic actors of our own, I am struck by the much greater effort which they seem to make in order to drive their points home, and in order to get what they think variety. Sir Charles Wyndham is the only English actor I can think of at the moment who does not make unnecessary grimaces, who does not insist on acting when the difficult thing is not to act. In Tartuffe Coquelin stands motionless for 5 minutes at a time, without change of expression, and yet nothing can be more expressive than his face at those moments. In Chopin's G minor Nocturne, Opus 15, there is an F held for 3 bars, and when Rubinstein played the Nocturne, says Mr. Huneker in his instructive and delightful book on Chopin, he prolonged the tone, by some miraculous means, so that it swelled and diminished, and went singing into D, as if the instrument were an organ. It is that power of sustaining an expression, unchanged, and yet always full of living significance, that I find in Coquelin. It is a part of his economy, the economy of the artist. The improviser disdains economy, as much as the artist cherishes it. Coquelin has some half-dozen complete variations of the face he has composed for Tartuffe, no more than that, with no insignificances of expression thrown away, but each variation is a new point of view, from which we see the whole character.